Hello and welcome to Intro to Painting. This series features simple paintings that anyone can do. So grab your canvas and paints and paint with me. Today we're going to be doing a daytime scene with some fluffy clouds, but giving it an Animal Crossing twist. But first, let's talk materials. For my canvas, I have an 18 by 24 pre-gessoed one I got from Blick. Lots of craft stores carry these and you can paint in any size you'd like. To mix my paints, I have a palette, and mine is tempered glass. They sell disposable ones that are kind of like wax paper and they come in a pad. You could use foam plates, you just need something to mix your colors on. Next I have paintbrushes. Now I have a big variety of paintbrushes and I tend to just pick one that works well for me. If I'm doing big areas, I want a big brush, and if I'm doing small areas, well, then I'll want a smaller paintbrush. So some of my favorites, I have a really big flat, and this is a 16 flat in the Artist Loft brand. I'm going to need it for the sky because it's a big area and I want to fill it in quickly. I have a large round, so it's just, you can see the difference between those two. It's a flat and a round. I have a smaller flat, so you can see kind of the size difference there. So you want kind of a large one, a medium one. I don't really use small flats. I have some different round brushes that are a bit smaller. So those are just smaller rounds. I have a filbert, which is kind of a mix between a flat and a round, and I just really need a smaller round. Filberts aren't anything special to me. I'd prefer to use a round, it's just something I've had around. And I have a tiny little brush, and I use this for details. The next thing I have is a palette knife, and I use this to mix my colors. Now if you're using a paintbrush and you're trying to mix all your paints, all the paint is going to get up into the metal ferrule and you're going to have kind of this weird contamination where there's some blue up here and you're trying to paint red and your color's turning purple. So I don't like to mix with my brushes, I try to use them only for painting, so that's why I use a palette knife. It allows me to like scoop and mix my paints and then wipe it clean every time. One of the other tools I use a lot is chalk, and this is a small piece of chalk or Conte crayon. They sell it in pencil, which would probably be great because I always get it all over my hands. I have it in a few different colors, but I find white works best. It also erases best off of my paints. You'll also need something to wash your brushes off with. I just have an old recycled container that I have filled with water. For my paints, any acrylic will work. Personally, I really like golden acrylics and heavy body. This is my yellow, so you'll need a mid-road yellow, some sort of mixing blue or cyan, the same thing in red or magenta. You will need a black, and I'm using Mars Black. You're also going to need a white, and I have titanium white. There's a few other whites. Titanium's really great because it's also very opaque. Now when you're doing acrylic paintings, you want to start from the background and move into the foreground. So we're going to be painting our blue sky first. We're going to need our blue, white, and black to begin. Blue, and I need quite a bit of that color because I'm going to be filling the whole canvas with sky. And with black, I need just a little bit. And as for white, I need quite a bit of white. Now here's where the palette knife is going to come in handy. I'm going to start by scooping some of my blue off into a new area on my palette. And I just scoop and then I flip upside down and kind of wipe off the edges back onto the palette. I'm going to grab just a little tiny bit of black and mix that in, and I'm just going to swirl that around until the blue is a little bit darker. And I don't see any of the swirls of black left over. And then I'm just going to take all that paint, scoop it back up, and make a nice neat little pile of it. Then I'm going to wipe off my palette knife so I don't contaminate that dark blue with the rest of the blue I need. I'm going to scoop a bit more blue, leaving some of it here still, and mix that into the white. So I have a lighter blue over here. And the same thing goes, I don't want to have any swirls left over of the two colors. I want it to be a nice homogeneous mixture. And then I'm just going to re-scoop it all back up and make a nice neat little pile of it. And then wipe off my palette knife again. Moving on to the actual painting part, I'm just going to get the tip of my brush wet, just so there's some moisture in there to help spread paints out evenly. And then I'm going to start with this dark blue I mixed up with the blue and the black. I'm just going to kind of load that onto my paintbrush, move over to my painting, and I'm just going to bring that all the way across the top because I want it to be dark blue up top. So I'm just going to go all the way across, And I like to wrap my canvas with my painting, so I'm also going to paint across the top. Then I'm just going to bring this dark blue down, and I'm going to let it be kind of see-through and feathered. I'm going to go maybe about a third down. And this is so I can blend it in with my next color. And then whatever I have left over for the dark blue, I'm just going to evenly bring across here and just bring it as far down as I can. Now that I have a nice even coating of that dark blue, I'm just going to move straight into my pure cyan. I didn't even wash my brush because I'm just going to go back here, and I'm trying to make them blend anyway. So I'm just going to take this all the way across, and you'll notice I started a little further down. So I can take that and just work that back up into that dark blue. And I want to work my way up first because that's drying, and acrylic paints dry very, very quickly. So I want to make sure I have a nice transition between the two. And I'll just work my way back down into the plain blue. And then do the same thing I had done before where I just feather it down. And then make sure I get those edges. Now I want that light blue to take up just the very, very bottom of this. So I'm going to use some more of this plain blue just to work that down. Now I've realized I've run out of paint, and I'm at a good point because I don't have to mix up a blue. I'm just going to use that cyan right out of the tube. Just squeeze a bit more onto my palette. And I always make sure I put the lids back on my acrylic paints because they dry out so fast. I don't want the investment I've put into this bottle of paint going to waste. So, like I said, I just put some more back on my palette, and I can continue moving that blue down. I think this is a good spot to start bringing in some of that light blue, and without washing my brush because I want it to fade, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of that light blue and start laying that down a little bit below. Then, like before, I'm just going to work it back up into the regular blue. And I'm finding that transition isn't as smooth as it was before. So I'm just going to go back into the regular blue I had and kind of paint that right on top of that line while it's still wet. Work it down, work it back up. And you'll notice I'm using real long strokes trying to go the entire width of my canvas. Maybe grab some more of the regular blue. Start up towards the top. Working it back and forth, up and down. And by up and down, I don't mean like this way. I mean just as I go back and forth, pulling it further down the canvas. And then I'm just going to do the same thing where I feather it down. Then working my way with more of that lighter blue. Now I can just use up the rest of that light blue to finish off the bottom of this canvas. I have the front done, the sides done, and the top done. Don't forget about the bottom. Now it's important to let this dry before we put any clouds on, so we're going to leave this alone for a while. Now that the sky has dried, I only need two colors for the clouds, titanium white and blue. So I'm going to put some titanium white on my palette, and I need a good bit because this is going to be the majority of the clouds. For the blue, I don't need quite as much just because it's going to darken up the bases of them as I'm painting. The brushes I'm using for the clouds is this big round, and I'm going to be using this towards the top of the canvas, and I'll switch to the little one once I get down further. Now to paint the clouds, I've taken a little bit of that titanium white on the tip of my brush, and then I'm just going to draw in some of those fuzzy cloud shapes. And I want to have quite a bit of paint on my brush when I do this. And then they're just going to kind of trail off so they're horizontal here where this line is parallel. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of that blue onto my brush while it's still wet and kind of draw in a bottom line and then kind of blend that up and out. I'm noticing my cloud is a bit transparent. You're seeing that dark blue back there. That's probably because my brush was slightly wet. I tried to dry it off before I started. So I'm gonna let that cloud dry and I'm gonna move on to doing a few more. I may have to do a second layer on top of it later. So for my next cloud, just grabbing more of that white paint. And my clouds are gonna get a bit smaller, not necessarily shorter, but height-wise they're gonna get smaller the further down I go. And if I have to, wrap around the side of the canvas. Grab just a little bit of that blue. Draw on the bottom of the cloud. And then just blend the two in together. And for the tip of this, I'm noticing it's not quite where I want it to be pointy. So I'll just take that smaller brush. Just bring that out a little bit. Now, this cloud turned out a lot better. The reason is I used a lot more of that white paint and it's a lot more opaque than my blue. So make sure you're using a lot of paint, especially if you're seeing your blue sky behind the clouds. So let's do that first cloud one more time. We'll make sure we're using a lot of that titanium white paint so it's really thick on that canvas. I'm just going to try and stay in those lines I had before. Maybe I'll blend it down this time. Maybe that'll help me a little bit. Grab some more of the blue. Do the base of that cloud. And then just kind of swirl the two together. Now that I have a few of these clouds in, some of the bigger ones, I'm just going to move to a smaller brush and just do a couple little small guys out towards the bottom. If you're finding the tips of your clouds are getting too blue, what I do is I just kind of wipe off my brush on a paper towel to get rid of any of that extra blue paint. Then I'll pick up some white and make sure I have quite a bit of it on my brush. And then I'll just go and start doing a new cloud. It's also important that you keep your clouds a bit random. Some of them should overlap, some of them shouldn't. You don't want to keep it really consistent. So it should be very random and organic. I have a good amount of clouds in, but I think the edges are kind of missing something, so I'm just going to throw a couple more little clouds in on the edges. So they do wrap to the sides too, so don't forget about them. Maybe I'll make them a little bit longer just so they match. I'm thinking those first two clouds still need more, so I'm going to go ahead and just go back over this guy again. Making sure I am using all that paint. In order to step your clouds up to another level, you can take just a little bit of white on a smaller brush. So I just put some on that lighter brush, and you can start to bring in some layers of clouds just inside of the other ones. So I'm just using a little bit of that titanium white, and then I'm just going to kind of scrub it down into this cloud so we start to get some layers. So I can do that there. Maybe I kind of want to bring one in here. Sometimes I get too much on, like I did here, so I just kind of tap some of the extra off my brush. We'll just bring it back. And I'm just scrubbing it so it blends nicely into my other stuff. Now that the clouds are dry, it's time to add in the Animal Crossing element. So I'm going to be drawing in a balloon and a present up here. So I'm just using that white chalk I had mentioned earlier. And I'm drawing in a balloon shape with a little bit of that ruffle down at the bottom. And it's just going to lead into the presents. Now, I know drawing is scary for some people, so that's why I do use chalk, because if I was using pencil, it's hard to erase on the paint, but with chalk, after my painting is dried at least, I can take a wet paper towel and get rid of it if I've messed up. So I just wanted to point out a couple of the simple shapes. The balloon shape here is just like an egg, and I notice sometimes that if parts of it are a little flat, I can just take that chalk and kind of round it out if I need to. This little piece down here is kind of like a cut-off triangle, so if I continued it, it would just be a full triangle. And then I wanted to have my present kind of swooping off to the right, so I just kind of drew a curved line straight down. For the box itself, it is in a 2-point perspective, so I see the top of it, but it also goes off to both sides. So I started by drawing the back of the present here, the top of the present on the front, so I had a diamond shape. Then from the corners of the diamonds, I just brought lines straight out, and I know you can't see the one over the cloud because it's in white, and then I just took the same line I have here on the top front, and I just copied it down. For the bow, it's just kind of a letter C on the left and the right, a front and a back C, and then I just drew in some extra lines for where the red ribbon is going to go around the box. For the balloon and the present, I'm going to be using the same 3 colors. I have my titanium white, so I'm just going to take some of that and put some of it on my palette. And I need quite a bit because I'm going to be priming my balloon in white first, along with the present. I need some of the magenta for the ribbon and the balloon itself. And then I need some Mars Black, and I don't need very much of this, it's just for the shading and then also for the string. Now because I'm using white chalk on white clouds, I'm just going to go ahead and just use a pencil to mark in some of these pieces I can't see so well. So you guys can also see where they go. Just like that. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to repaint everything white, because if I start painting this part of the box white, one coat of white isn't going to cover it, and I'm going to see through it and see the sky. The same goes for the balloon. I need to paint it white before I can paint it red. So I'm going to start by painting the box white. Now as I paint the box white, I'm going to try and stay inside my lines a little bit so I can see where they are. The outside ones aren't as important, but it's more important to figure out where the ribbon I drew in is going to go. So I'm going to kind of paint straight to this chalk line. And then all the way down to the bottom. And I'm just using that round I had used earlier for the clouds. And if I'm finding I'm not getting a good straight line or I'm having a hard time getting into those corners, I'll just wash this brush off. I'm just kind of swirling it around in the water, making sure all that paint's gone, and then I just lightly blot it on a paper towel to get rid of the extra water. And then I'll switch to a smaller brush. So this is where this brush is going to come in handy, this little tiny one I showed at the beginning of the video, just to make sure I get into all those little parts of it and I have nice straight lines. Now I'm going to do the same for the top, and I'm just going to be really careful that I know exactly where this is going. Now I didn't need to prime the string because the black is very, very opaque, and on top of that blue I'm not going to have any trouble covering that at all. Now I'm using the small brush for the balloon and it's taking forever, so I'll just wash this brush out and switch to my first one. Now that that's complete, I can move back to the present, give it another coat so it's a lot more solid, but this time I need to start adding some value. So I'm going to go ahead and start by painting this right front side of the box. And I'm going to paint it all the way up to this line and cover that finally. Then I'm just going to grab a tiny bit of black, and I'm going to add some value. So right along that center line, I'm just going to lay the black there. And I'm not trying to outline, I'm trying to add value. So with all this extra black I have across my brush, I'm also going to bring it across the top. Then I'm going to blot my brush on a paper towel to get rid of this. And I'm not trying to like straight up and down, I kind of like lay it on the side and pull it to get rid of that extra. Then I'm just going to kind of paint in between where the white and that black are until it starts turning a bit more gray. Because I want it to be gray, not solid black. Then I'll go this direction and kind of just fade that black into my white so it turns a bit more gray. So I have a nice value to that present. Now I'm finding that this is not dark enough on this side, so I'm just going to add a little bit more black to the tip of my brush and just darken that same gray and just pull it further and further into the present. Now I'm going on to the other side of the box. I'm giving it more white just to make sure it's very opaque and I'm not seeing any sky or clouds behind it. Then, just like before, I'm going to grab a little bit of black, and this time I want to add it on the opposite side. Because my cloud is really contrasting, so I'm adding it on the opposite side. And that's because my cloud is pretty much the same color as the present, and I want it to stand out. Do the same along the top. And then I'm just going to blend the two together like I did over there. On this one, I think I would like it to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to not use as much black, just try and blend the white into it a bit more. Now I'm going to work on the top, give it another coat of white. And the shading for the top is going to be a little bit different because I see the entire surface, but it's tilted a different way. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it in white. Make sure I get all those corners straight out to the edges so the present looks square. Now I've just grabbed that touch of black. And I think I'm going to add it along the back edge on the left. And then maybe just some in the center because the present is going to have that bow and it's going to kind of give a shadow to the top of the box. And I'm noticing I put way too much black there, so I'm just blotting off the brush and getting a little bit more white so I can tone that down. And it's hard to kind of describe that shape. I tried to leave this front corner blank and this outside corner blank with white and not add any gray to those, so they look like they're highlighted in the sun. But I'm trying to keep it kind of just this weird, it's almost like a cloud shape in there. And if I need to, I can just cover it up with some of that red ribbon. And I'm thinking this side of the box probably needs a little bit more value, so maybe this ribbon is going to cast a shadow on the box. Maybe there's just a bit more value to this side, just to make it stand out from the other one. So maybe I just need to get a little bit more white. Just blend that gray in. Then I need to make it even by giving this guy a shadow, but maybe not using as much of the gray all over. So it's time to let that dry, and it looks like the top of the balloon is just about dry, ready for the red. In the meantime, I think I'm going to do this string. So I'm just going to grab some pure Mars Black. Just go straight on that chalk line I had and draw in the string with the black. For the balloon, I'm going to be using that magenta, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a solid coat of the magenta first, and then I'm going to bring some values with highlights and shadows onto it. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. And I don't want to see any of that white right now, so I'm making sure I go all the way to the edge. I'm giving myself a nice line, just being real careful. While that balloon is drying, this part is pretty dry. I can touch it and it's not tacky at all. So I'll just take some white and I'm just going to go ahead and paint in those ribbon shapes for the bow. So they're kind of like the letter C. And I'm not super concerned. I'm finding my chalk was a little bit off, but that's okay. I can just paint these C shapes in any way I want, and I can erase that chalk later. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paint the rest of this ribbon in. It goes off to the side and then down the side of the box. And then there's the tails of the ribbon. Now that things have really dried, I can get rid of that chalk. So I have a wet paper towel with very clean water, and I'm just going to go ahead and on all the edges of this, wherever that chalk is, I'm just going to kind of scrub a little bit. And it is very important that your paints have dried for at least a couple hours, so it doesn't ruin anything or smear anything. So that's all gone, taken care of. Before I go back to painting, I have a tip for you. If you're ever going to be away for a while, on your palette you can wrap it in clear plastic wrap. This is actually the clear stuff that my canvas came in, I'm just recycling it. That way the air doesn't get to your paints and they don't dry out, so they'll stay nice for a while. Mine stayed for a few hours, so I can continue painting with the same paints I had. Moving straight back to the balloon, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some value. I want it to be lighter right here where the light's going to hit it. And I'm choosing this based on which way the balloon is going. I think it would be nice if it just started here. So I'm going to lay that down first, pick up a little bit of red, and I didn't wash my brush at all, and just kind of blend that out this way. Pick up a little more red, still not washing my brush. Now I think that's kind of sloppy, so I just took a little bit of the white back on my brush and swirled it around. So I'm going to do that, maybe wipe off my brush, grab some more white, and kind of go in the middle of that, maybe back into a little bit of the red on the edges again. And it's just a back and forth between basically just the red and the white until I'm happy with the blending I get. Maybe I don't want it to have any pure white. Then I'm going to take just a little bit of white. And I still have some pink on my brush, so it's not really affecting it too much. And add a little bit of a highlight down there. It's kind of L-shaped, so I followed along the side and then over. Now it's time to do the same thing, but in reverse. I was doing the highlights, now it's time for the shadows. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black on my brush, and I don't have very much at all. And I'm going to kind of do the opposite of what I did up here. And instead of doing a circle this time, I'm just going to kind of go this way. And I have washed my brush off since I did the light. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm just going to blot my brush off to get rid of any extra black I have. Grab some more red. And then I'm just going to kind of go on the inside of this. Just to blend that black nicely back into my plain red. And I may need to get some more just to do the edges again. Then I'll grab just a little bit of black, just for underneath here. And I kind of went along where the two balloon parts would overlap and then down the back. Blot my brush off of any extra black, grab a little bit of red, and just try and blend them together. Now, using shading creates form, which makes things look 3D. So that's why my balloon looks a bit round, and that's what I was aiming for. So now I'm going to be doing the same thing on the ribbon. I'm going to start by painting it red. Then I'm just going to start over here on the left. Then I may just grab a little bit of white without washing my brush. And then just kind of maybe bring it on the left, just near the top, and up top of the present. And then blot the brush off of any extra. And then just kind of go on top of the red and the white together to turn it into kind of a pink color so it has some value. And then maybe I'll just grab a tiny bit of black, maybe put it down here. Blot the brush to get rid of any extra, and then just paint back and forth until it's blended in. So I did that half, now I'm going to do the right half of that present. So I've painted it red. I can take a little bit of white to add some value. Blot the brush to get rid of any extra. And then just go back and forth to blend it in. Grab a little bit of black and do the same thing. Now for the actual ribbon. There's actually two parts. There's kind of a back part and a front part. So it's important that we use the value with this instead of just painting the whole thing red, or it won't have any form. It will be very flat and you won't be able to tell what's going on. So I'm going to start with this left loop by painting the whole thing red. I'm going to make sure I go straight to the edge so I don't have any of that white underpaint showing through. Then again, I'll just add a little bit of white to my brush without washing it. And I'm going to kind of draw the top of this C shape in, like this. So it kind of starts out here, and then works its way in, and I'm going to go down the side of it. Blot the brush off, just wipe it on the paper towel. And I'm just going to go back into it, blend it in with the red that's already there, so it turns a bit more dark pink instead of bright, bright white. Blot the brush off again, grabbing a little bit of black. Now I'm going to go and do the inside of this. So I'm starting right out here and then just working my way back. Getting rid of the extra on a paper towel. And then I'm just going to smear that black in into the red that's already there. And if I'm finding I'm having a hard time blending the color back in, like if it's dried, sometimes I'll just grab the original color, which is the red in this case, and just taking a little tiny drop of water on my paintbrush, and then going back over to try and use that to blend. So same thing on the other side, painting it red first, grabbing a little bit of white, And using some red to blend it back in. And that one kind of got lost. I must have had too much red, so I'm just going to grab a little more white and basically just redo it while everything is still wet. And I know painting big is scary sometimes because you have a lot of space to fill, but if I were doing this bigger, it would be a lot easier on me because I wouldn't have to worry about using such a tiny brush and making sure things blend so well. So now for the center part of the bow. It's just kind of a circle right here in the middle. Painted it red. Blot my brush off and grab a little bit of white. Add just a dot on the left, very similar to the balloon where the white is. And then just a little bit of black out here, very similar to the balloon again. Then I'm just going to try and blend those. Now I have to fill in the tails. So I'm just having them sort of come off the bow. And I'm just trying to make the point of that bow like a V shape, so I'm just bringing it straight out. And then again, I'll just take a little bit of white and bring in some highlights. And because it's sitting underneath the bow, the shadow's going to go right on the inside piece, right where it's sitting underneath. Then again, same on the other side. And it's important that they're the same size. I'm finding that I kind of made the first one a bit bigger and the second one a bit smaller. And shadows underneath the bow again. And then just to touch things up, I noticed my string needs to actually go a little bit further. So just grab a little bit of black and just bring that straight down to the bow. I'm also going to take some of the string and just put it around the smallest part of the balloon right here. The last thing we need to do is sign our name. So I'm just going to take some of that titanium white and fill in my name. I like to sign on the right and I like to match it to the colors in the painting. In this case, white works pretty good, but it's kind of getting lost for that cloud. So you could decide to add some red to it, you could use a darker blue, but for now white works. And we're done. We have our daytime scene with our Animal Crossing balloon and present. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a print or a poster, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. And if you've painted with me today, I'd love to see it. Please send me a picture on Twitter. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of Intro to Painting, and I'll see you again here on MalMakes.